In the opening days of March 1943, at Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, the tool slid from grease-covered fingers as Captain Paul Irvin Gunn gazed upon the altered bomber in front of him. Concealed within that plane lurked an invention that defied all norms, and creation that flouted every rule in the United States Army Air Force Handbook, an undertaking his superior had never formally greenlit. 850 caliber machine guns aimed straight ahead jutted out from the spot where the bombardier's transparent front typically sat. The B-25 Mitchell, a medium bomber crafted for accurate strikes from high above, had morphed into a radically new beast. A vessel annihilator, a trade disruptor, a forbidden trial that might rescue the Pacific Front or land gun in a military tribunal. Unbeknownst to Gunn or his comrades, this unsanctioned alteration, sparked by sheer urgency and raw anger, would unleash the worst setback the Imperial Japanese Navy endured throughout the Pacific conflict. The equations shaping the Allies' triumph in the Southwest Pacific weren't drafted in strategies endorsed by Washington officials, but forged in fabrication sheds and repair bays by a rebellious 43-year-old pilot waging his solitary crusade. The path leading here originated 2 years prior, on December 8, 1941, by Manila's Clock. Paul Irvin Gunn, still unknown by the nickname Pappy, positioned himself at Nichols Field, observing as Japanese raiders systematically demolished the U.S. aerial assets in the Philippines. As overseer of the nascent Philippine Airlines, he oversaw 4 Beechcraft Model 18 civilian planes. Soon after, Major General Louis Brereton seized those planes and swore Gunn in as an Army Air Force captain. What was meant as a short stint in the conflict stretched into a grueling 3-year saga of ingenuity, retribution, and mechanical breakthroughs. At age 42, Gunn was a retired Navy Chief Petty Officer with 2 decades as an enlisted flyer under his belt, having stepped away in December 1939. He'd mastered aviation in the 1920s, flown with the famed Top Hatters Squadron, and trained pilots at Pensacola Naval Air Station. His knowledge of planes stemmed not from pages in books but from years of tinkering with them, piloting them, and now and then wrecking them. Yet that December dawn rendered such skills irrelevant. Gunn faced a far more pressing crisis. His spouse, Clara Louise, affectionately Polly to all who knew her, and their 4 kids were stranded in Manila amid the encroaching Japanese troops. His sons, Paul Jr. and Nathan, were in their teens. His girls, Connie and Julie, were still small. The household had settled in Manila while Gunn managed the airline, enjoying a plush expat life that vanished in an instant. Amid the turmoil of ensuing weeks, Gunn piloted scouting and ferry runs over the crumbling Philippine barriers. He evaded enemy pursuits, endured a downing over dense forest, trekked back to base unharmed, and hopped right back into the cockpit. During one sortie, he claimed a Distinguished Flying Cross for steering a defenseless cargo plane into Bataan, dropping vital medical goods to surrounded U.S. soldiers, threading through foe-dominated skies on pure nerve and boldness alone. Still, he couldn't get to his loved ones. On Christmas Eve of 1941, directives came to ferry vital staff to Australia. He cashed out his full service pay, scrounged funds from officer buddies, and geared up to whisk his family away. But the enemy surge proved relentless. His relatives couldn't reach the airstrip before takeoff. Gunn faced the agonizing pick: desert them or defy commands. He headed to Australia since duty demanded it, since the broader fight outweighed any single household, since lingering invited doom or imprisonment. Mere weeks later, on January 20th, 1942, Polly and the kids fell into Japanese custody and were shuttled to the University of Santo Tomas, now repurposed as a detention site for foreign non-combatants. A fracture deep within Gunn formed upon hearing this. The warrior who pressed on bore little resemblance to the one who'd departed Manila. He'd abandoned his wife and 4 offspring to a foe notorious for savagery. Each passing day in that facility marked time he couldn't shield them. His sole recourse lay in hastening the war's close. Unable to rescue them personally, he'd dismantle every vessel, every flyer, every logistics route sustaining the Japanese hold on the Philippines. This wasn't sanctioned doctrine. It was payback masked as progress. When Major General George C. Kenney landed in Brisbane during the final days of July 1942 to lead the Allied air forces in the Southwest Pacific, he encountered chaos. His forerunner had been ousted, spirits plummeted, gear fell short. The Japanese dominated New Guinea's skies and loomed over Australia proper. General Douglas MacArthur, overseeing the theater, harbored zero faith in his aviators and voiced it without restraint. Kenney was 53 years. At 48 years of age, George Kenney was a veteran of World War I aerial combat, boasting 2 verified victories and a Silver Star Medal. He had instructed at the Air Corps Tactical School and gained a reputation for innovative strategies. During a lengthy address from MacArthur, highlighting the deficiencies in Allied aviation capabilities, Kenney remained courteous throughout before making a single demand: permission to dismiss any personnel he deemed unproductive. Caught off guard, MacArthur consented. In short order, Kenney reorganized his leadership team, promoting bold junior officers and establishing an advanced base in New Guinea. To accelerate choices in the field, he designated Brigadier General Ennis Whitehead as his frontline leader, empowering him to adjust plane allocations according to meteorological and operational demands instead of relying on directives from Brisbane. Yet, shifts in staffing alone couldn't compensate for inadequate armaments. Strikes by Allied forces from mid- and upper-level altitudes were disastrously futile against Japanese vessels. Bombing from great heights allowed ample opportunity for evasion. The B-17 Flying Fortresses achieved strikes on fewer than 1% of aimed objectives. Japanese supply fleets continued replenishing their outposts in New Guinea without interference. Allied infantry suffered fatalities in the dense foliage as new enemy soldiers disembarked from vessels impervious to aerial assaults. Kenney had pondered this challenge as far back as 1928, during his tenure as an educator at the Tactical Institution. He had proposed the notion of skip bombing, where ordnance would be deployed from minimal elevations to ricochet over the waves like skipped pebbles, colliding with vessel hulls beneath the surface amid the thinnest plating. The principle held promise. Implementing it, however, remained elusive. B-17s were missing frontal defensive guns. Approaching at deck level exposed pilots to intense flak barrages without means to neutralize the crews. That all shifted upon Kenney's encounter with Paul Gunn. In August 1942, Kenney uncovered unauthorized alterations to A-20 Havoc light bombers within the 3rd Attack Group. The alterations were rudimentary, yet practical. An individual had cleared out the nose compartment's bombardier station and fitted 50 caliber machine guns in its stead, all oriented ahead. The strategy involved raking enemy sights from ultra-low heights to quell defensive fire prior to bomb release. Upon probing further, Kenney identified Captain Paul Gunn as the primary originator who had improvised by salvaging armaments from damaged fighters and integrating them into assault planes. Gunn had acquired his expertise in plane alterations via experimentation over time. Lacking any official engineering credentials, he drew on 20 years of practical involvement to grasp airframe integrity, balance, and armament integration. Many commanders might have pursued disciplinary action against Gunn for tampering with official equipment sans approval. Instead, Kenney promptly placed him on his immediate team as a dedicated initiatives coordinator and tasked him with an audacious goal: adapt every A-20 in the region for close ground operations and complete it without delay. Gunn labored through 18-hour shifts. He procured guns from downed planes, improvised supports in improvised facilities, and conducted individual flight trials for each upgrade. He incorporated 4 50 caliber machine guns into the front of every A-20, affixed extra guns along the body, and equipped racks for delayed descent shrapnel ordnance. These enhanced A-20s entered action in September 1942, targeting a Japanese base at Buna. Outcomes surpassed predictions. The gunship A-20s descended to canopy height, weapons firing relentlessly, neutralizing flak sites prior to payload drops. Japanese personnel, habituated to spotting elevated bombers well in advance, found themselves overwhelmed. The raid obliterated scores of grounded planes and proved that ultra-low strafing runs could transform aviation tactics. Kenney swiftly instructed Gunn to adapt B-25 Mitchell medium bombers similarly. Larger than the A-20, the B-25 offered extended reach, greater payload capacity, and room for additional forward-directed guns. Should Gunn succeed in converting the Mitchell into a strafing platform, it would emerge as the premier vessel hunter in the area. The B-25 Mitchell originated in 1939 as a mid-altitude bomber. This twin-engine plane featured a 67-foot 7-inch wingspan. It relied on two Wright R2600 radial engines, each generating 1,700 horsepower. Standard defenses included 650 caliber machine guns, plus up to 3,000 pounds of bombs. It accommodated a 5-member crew: pilot, navigator, bombardier, communications specialist, and tail gunner. The model honored General Billy Mitchell, the polarizing proponent of aviation dominance, who faced a 1925 court-martial for his bold opinions. In total, around 990 B-25s were produced across 2 North American aviation facilities, one in Inglewood, California, and the other in Kansas City, Kansas. The B-25 achieved renown in April 1942, when Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle commanded 16 B-25Bs in a bold incursion on Tokyo. Taking off from the Airk, the USS Hornet served as the launch platform for the Doolittle raid, which inflicted only slight structural harm, yet delivered a massive psychological lift to the U.S. public amid the shock of Pearl Harbor. Crucially, it compelled Japan to retain its fighter planes domestically for homeland protection instead of deploying them to battle zones. Even so, the B-25's core function stayed focused on medium-level bombing runs, where it struggled notably against naval vessels. Paul Gunn spotted untapped capabilities in the B-25 that others overlooked. Its forward compartment offered ample space for installing several heavy machine guns. The dual-engine setup ensured backup reliability. One failure wouldn't spell disaster. The robust build allowed it to withstand heavy damage. Above all, the Mitchell boasted sufficient endurance to access Japanese maritime routes beyond the reach of the shorter-legged A-20. Toward the end of 1942, Gunn started altering B-25s inside a repair facility in Townsville, Australia. He collaborated with Captain Jack Fox, the regional rep from North American Aviation, tasked with verifying that any changes adhered to manufacturer guidelines. Rather than enforcing rules, Fox joined Gunn as a partner in the war's boldest unsanctioned plane upgrade initiative. The initial hurdle involved stripping out the bombardier and the fragile clear nose cone. This cut down on mass and removed an exposed spot pointless for close-to-ground strikes. Gunn swapped the see-through front for a sturdy metal cone packed with 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, all aimed ahead and controlled by the pilot. Every weapon came with 500 rounds. Their firing rate hit about 850 rounds per minute each, enabling the pilot to unleash a barrage of bullets capable of ripping apart any objective in moments. Yet 4 guns fell short for Gunn. He fitted 2 additional 50 caliber guns into cheek pods along both sides of the front body, positioned right under and aft of the pilot's area. These side-mounted pieces protruded just past the prop arc, permitting safe forward shots without rounds intersecting the propeller path. Fixed in place, they boosted the pilot's offensive punch. Next, Gunn took a daring step. The B-25 featured a top-mounted turret with paired 50 caliber guns situated rearward of the cockpit. Designed to swivel for rear and overhead defense, Gunn fixed it in the front shooting stance, incorporating 2 extra guns under the pilot's command. The co-pilot could aim these via a cockpit sight, or the pilot might trigger every gun at once with a central switch. At this point, the revamped B-25 packed 8 forward-pointing 50 caliber machine guns, hurling roughly 180 pounds of ordnance per second. By contrast, one P-51 Mustang fighter bore just 6 50 caliber guns. The upgraded B-25 channeled the striking power of over a single fighter into a bomber frame that also hauled 2,000 pounds of explosives. These alterations posed major technical obstacles. Extra mass up front threw off the plane's balance point, rendering it tail-light and tricky to handle. Gunn countered by relocating gear rearward and adding weights to the rear. The massive kickback from all 8 guns blazing together strained the frame. He bolstered the forward area with extra supports. The weapons produced intense warmth and fumes. Gunn installed airflow setups and shifted ammo holds to minimize ignition hazards. The biggest issue, though, was synchronizing the guns. All 8 barrels had to focus their streams at a set spot ahead, usually 200 to 400 yards out. Misalignment would scatter shots wide of the mark. Gunn devised an on-ground calibration method with markers at exact ranges, tweaking each mount until perfect overlap occurred. He personally fired test bursts, fine-tuning endlessly and rejecting any plane that didn't satisfy his criteria. The full overhaul demanded about 2 weeks per unit under non-stop effort. Gunn instructed ground teams in the procedures implementing assembly line efficiency. Come December 1942, he'd converted sufficient B-25s to arm the 91st Bombardment Squadron. This unit required a leader versed in skim-the-deck assaults and willing to buck standard bombing protocols. Kenny picked Major Ed Lana, an aviator who'd climbed from first lieutenant to major in mere weeks thanks to his bold combat command. Lana excelled in ultra-low flights and had won Kenny's confidence. Together, Lana and Gunn crafted strategies that revolutionized sea combat. The enhanced B-25s would skim toward enemy ships at razor-low heights, dipping as near as 50 feet over waves while pushing top velocity around 300 kph. At such level and pace, tracking them proved nearly impossible for deck crews. The approach velocity outpaced what handheld the pilots aimed to close in swiftly, ensuring the planes vanished before the enemy gunners could recalibrate. As the B-25s drew near, aviators unleashed a barrage from all 8 nose-mounted machine guns, starting around 1,000 yards out, gradually directing the volley toward the enemy vessel. The torrent of 50-caliber rounds raked across the decks, eliminating or pinning down the anti-aircraft crews, wrecking gun emplacements, mangling superstructures, and sowing widespread disorder. While the gunfire inflicted serious harm, its main goal wasn't to submerge the vessel, though the impact might have been considerable. Rather, it aimed to neutralize the ship's armaments and instill dread in the personnel. Next, followed the ordnance drop. From distances of roughly 200 to 400 yards, skimming at the lowest feasible height, the flyer would deploy a bomb equipped with a 4 to 5 second delay fuse. Hurtling from the plane at 300 km, the projectile would hit the sea and ricochet over the waves. It might rebound once or even twice before crashing into the hull at or under the waterline. That delay prevented an immediate blast on contact. Instead, the device burrowed through the plating, dipped just below the surface, and then erupted. The detonation ripped through the ship's most fragile section beneath the protective armor, where the outer shell was at its slimmest. Water's unyielding nature amplified the force, channeling shockwaves with ruthless power. Even one such underwater hit could snap the keel, breach fuel compartments, inundate machinery spaces, and trigger total structural collapse. By the moment of explosion, the B-25 had surged ahead of the objective, pulling up sharply to evade the outburst and any follow-on blasts. The full sequence, from initial bursts to payload release, spanned about 10 seconds. Though skip bombing wasn't a complete novelty, the British had tested it earlier, and some U.S. aviators had experimented solo. The fusion of this method with intense frontal armament marked a fresh breakthrough. The Strafer-modified nose transformed the bomber into its self-contained protector, quelling opposition prior to the bombing run. This synergy would wreak havoc. Meanwhile, as engineers adapted the planes, Allied spies kept tabs on Imperial Navy deployments. Decryptions from Ultra, the initiative that had unraveled Japanese fleet ciphers, yielded precise insights into adversarial strategies. The Melbourne-based fleet radio unit, dubbed FRUMEL, deciphered enemy transmissions virtually live. Toward the end of February 1943, FRUMEL captured signals revealing a large Japanese flotilla forming at Rabaul on New Britain. The fleet headed for Lae along New Guinea's north shore, loaded with personnel and materiel for troops resisting Allied pushes in Papua. Details were sharp. 8 freighters would transport around 6,900 soldiers from the 51st Division, screened by 8 destroyers. The group planned to sail from Rabaul at midnight on February 28, 1943, reaching Lae some 3 days afterward. This represented Japan's boldest bid to bolster New Guinea. Success would fortify their position substantially, possibly halting Allied momentum. Failure meant forfeiting thousands of battle-hardened fighters, rendering future sea reinforcements improbable. General Kenny spotted a chance to deploy his upgraded planes and tactics against a prize rivaling Pearl Harbor. He mustered all operable aircraft in the region for a unified assault. The assault group featured B-17 Flying Fortresses striking from mid-level, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters raking low, P-38 Lightning escorts maintaining overhead protection, and the retooled B-25 Strafers performing the skip bomb maneuvers. It stood as the biggest synchronized aerial effort yet in the Southwest Pacific. On February 28th, Kenny himself instructed the wing leaders. Directives were clear-cut: locate the fleet, strike relentlessly, show no leniency, destroy all vessels. This went beyond a skirmish. It was total eradication. Precisely at midnight on February 28, 1943, the Japanese formation left Simpson Harbor in Rabaul under Rear Admiral Masatomi Kimura aboard the destroyer Shirayuki. The 8 supply ships included Kyomaru, Kembu Maru, Teiyo Maru, Nojima, Ayamuru Maru, Ta Maru, Sinan Maru, and Osaka Maru. Escort came from 8 destroyers: Shirayuki, Asashio, Arashio, Tokitsukaze, Yukikaze, Urikaze, Shikinami, and Asagumo. About 100 Japanese Zero fighters provided aerial defense en route. This assembly marked Japan's mightiest resupply venture to date. Kimura anticipated casualties. Prior runs to New Guinea had taken hits, but leaders figured sufficient vessels would make it through to offload the men. They miscalculated. That same afternoon, a patrolling B-24 Liberator detected the convoy. Its operators broadcast the location, heading, and makeup. Kenny's headquarters promptly dispatched spotter planes to shadow the group. Conditions played to the Japanese advantage. At the outset, 2 tropical storms swept across the region, offering overhead clouding and cutting down on sight lines. Although Allied planes kept tabs on the group, they struggled to strike with any real impact amid the turbulent weather. The fleet advanced steadily at a pace of 7 knots, roughly 8 mph. This sluggish rate stemmed from the overburdened cargo vessels. The escorting destroyers were capable of 20 knots or faster, yet they were compelled to sink with the overall convoy's tempo. As darkness fell on March 1st, the Japanese force had traversed about 90 miles. They sat nearly midway to Lae. Conditions were worsening, a development that Kimura viewed favorably. Inclement skies promised reduced Allied air presence, though the gales also churned up turbulent waters that battered the troop carriers. Soldiers crammed in the lower compartments endured severe nausea in the packed confines. Come the dawn of March 2, 1943, skies cleared a bit. Allied spotter planes re-established line-of-sight tracking. Around 10:00 a.m., a formation of 29 B-17 Flying Fortresses descended from 5,000 feet. Such elevated drops proved largely futile as expected. The B-17s reported strikes, yet Japanese logs reveal scant harm. Perhaps a single carrier sustained minor injury. This raid achieved just one goal, compelling the convoy to zigzag frequently, which hampered their advance toward Lae. Over the course of March 2, further B-17 sorties persisted. The heavy bombers unleashed scores of ordnance from differing heights. Vessels dodged wildly, while Japanese interceptors tangled with the intruders. A handful of B-17s took hits. 3 enemy fighters met their end, but no hulls went under. These lofty assaults merely pestered the formation without halting it. As evening descended on March 2nd, Kenny anticipated the decisive blow would land at first light the following day. The adapted B-25 stood prepared. Major Lahr had drilled his aviators extensively. They'd simulated the assault sequence on a derelict vessel back on February 28th, incorporating joint groupings of B-17s, B-25s, P-38s, and Beaufighters. All flyers grasped the objective fully. Skip bombing drills had been honed, strafing armaments were calibrated, payloads were secured. The threshold beyond recall loomed near. With daybreak on March 3, 1943, atmospheric factors aligned ideally for an aerial assault. Unobscured heavens, sharp views, and serene swells. Rear Admiral Kimura likely sensed an ominous foreboding. His armada lay some 30 miles off Lae, near enough for shore batteries to offer limited defense, yet exposed to overhead peril. The Allied assault wing gathered near Cape Ward Hunt along Papua's northern shore. About 90 coalition planes zeroed in on the Japanese column, featuring B-17 Flying Fortresses, reworked B-25 Strafers, Royal Australian Air Force Beaufighters, and P-38 Lightning escorts. Sequential squadrons would assail from varied angles across the daylight hours. The onslaught kicked off near 10:00 a.m. B-17 passes hammered in from intermediate levels, drawing focus and spurring evasive actions among the ships. Next came the deck-skimming elements. Viewfighters led the charge, raking with 4 20mm autocannons and 6 machine guns to quash flak positions. Destroyers unleashed their full arsenal, but the approaching velocity overwhelmed them. Then, the reworked B-25 strafers swooped in, unleashing devastation. Tailored B-25 strafers joined several assault phases through the forenoon. One airman zeroed on the carrier Kyokusei Maru, nosing down to 50 feet over the waves. From 1,000 yards out, he unleashed hell. 50 caliber guns delivering a merged 6,800 rounds per minute and 180 pounds of lead each second tore into the vessel. Tracer rounds traced the barrage's path. The onslaught marched from the prow to the upper decks, pulverizing all in reach. Crewmen fell in place, flak mounts shattered. The command deck crumbled amid the barrage. Shrapnel scattered wildly. He then loosed his payload. A pair of 500-pound general-purpose bombs with time-delay fuses tumbled free. They splashed 200 yards astern, bounced once and crashed into the side just under the surface amidships. The flyer climbed and veered off. In his wake, the charges erupted. Twin colossal subsurface blasts gutted Kyokusei Maru from below. The carrier heaved wildly. Floods surged into propulsion spaces and cargo bays. She commenced foundering right away, heeling starboard. Sinking loomed in under 15 minutes. Subsequent reworked B-25s pressed on in trailing volleys. Each picked a mark. Each delivered the same ruinous sequence. Barrels spitting, ordnance ricocheting, hulls erupting. The carrier Kembaru absorbed repeated pounding. No fewer than 3 B-25s hammered her. The aggregate strafing wiped out most topside personnel. 4 projectiles breached subsurface. She snapped apart and vanished in fewer than 10 minutes. Teun Maru endured such intense raking that blazes erupted over the upper works. A duo of bombs rent the frame. The carrier submerged, carrying almost 1,000 soldiers inside. Nojima attempted to swerve a dive bomber, tried to hit it, but arrived too late. B-25 strafers then raked the vessel from end to end, before dropping a pair of bombs right into the engine compartment. The ship went dark and started flooding. It went down later that same day. The forward aircraft and leftover B-25s turned their attention to the destroyers. Admiral Kimura's command ship, the destroyer Shirayuki, suffered strafing that wiped out nearly the entire bridge crew, including the injured Kimura himself. A bomb exploded close to the rear, igniting a blaze in the ammunition storage. Follow-up blasts ripped away the aft portion. The destroyer vanished beneath the waves. Direct bomb strikes on Tokitsu Kaz set off its fuel reserves. The warship turned into a raging fireball and submerged in under an hour. While dodging around, Arashio rammed into the troop carrier Nojima and took severe punishment. Crews deserted the destroyer, which soon followed it to the bottom. During the whole assault, Japanese Zero fighters fought frantically to shield the fleet, yet P-38 Lightnings tangled with them up high as the B-25s flew at treetop level, too risky for enemy planes to dive without risking their own vessels. The teamwork was flawless. The raid wrapped up after about 40 minutes. As the Allied planes pulled back for reloading and refueling, the vista was nightmarish. 4 cargo ships were already underwater or going down. 3 escorts had disappeared. The rest limped away in disarray, battered and disorganized. Scores of Japanese troops and crewmen bobbed in the sea. Corpses drifted amid the debris. Fuel patches ignited into flames. That evening, Allied flyers came back for follow-up runs. Altered B-25s spotted the battered remnants crawling toward Leh. The strikes were precise and unrelenting. One vessel after another drew fire. The strafer B-25s swooped in close, machine guns roaring, ordnance bouncing across the surface. Additional freighters succumbed. The wounded destroyer Asashio absorbed further hits and plunged. By dusk on March 3rd, every one of the 8 transports and 4 out of 8 destroyers lay at the ocean floor. Roughly 3,000 Japanese personnel had perished or were perishing in the depths. Some 2,700 more got picked up by the 4 escorts that made it and by subs dispatched from Rabaul. Just around 200 soldiers ultimately landed at Leh, often stripped of arms or gear. From the initial 6,900 aboard, over 5,700 became casualties. The fleet was obliterated. Allied casualties stayed minimal. A single B-17 Flying Fortress fell to fire. 3 P-38s vanished in the dogfights. 13 airmen lost their lives. Against the enemy toll, it hardly counted as a clash. The engagement, later dubbed the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, marked a pivotal shift in the Pacific campaign. It showed beyond doubt that shore-based planes could annihilate a well-guarded seaborne force. It highlighted the power of skip bombing paired with intense close-range armament. It confirmed all the tweaks Gunn had applied to the B-25. Above all, it persuaded Japan that shipping reinforcements by water across the Southwest Pacific was untenable. Tokyo never risked another large-scale run to New Guinea. Isolated units there gradually weakened and faded as provisions ran out. General MacArthur released a statement boasting of 22 vessels downed, among them 3 cruisers and 7 destroyers, plus more than 12,000 enemy dead. The true figures were less, yet ruinous enough. Such overstatements fit the pattern of war-era hype. The real value lay in the broader consequences. Kenny had shown his strategies held up. Skip bombing proved practical. Retrofitted bombers delivered results. Close-to-the-deck assaults triumphed over fierce opposition. Paul Gunn, monitoring updates from Australia, likely savored a bitter triumph. His upgrades had wiped out a Japanese flotilla. His planes had taken out thousands of foes. Still, his relatives remained interned at Starter Thomas, and victory remained distant. The triumph at Bismarck Sea sparked swift growth in the upgrade initiative. Kenny directed that every B-25 on hand in the region get outfitted as a strafer. Gunn pushed even more fiercely, drilling new pilots, honing methods, boosting output. By summer 1943, the bulk of Southwest Pacific B-25s had received the treatment. North American Aviation, the builder, paid attention. Firm envoys toured Gunn's facilities, inspected the changes, and sought full blueprints. They aimed to weave Gunn's ideas into assembly line models. Gunn rose to major and headed stateside to collaborate with North American at their Englewood and Kansas City facilities. He devoted months in 1943 and into 1944 partnering with designers on mass-produced Strafer B-25 variants. The outcome was the B-25G, fitted with a 75mm nose cannon plus 450 caliber guns. 405 units of the B-25G rolled out. The 75 cm gun launched a 14.7-pound round, capable of punching through hull plating or leveling fortifications. Yet loading the cannon proved cumbersome. It demanded a gunner up front, and its firing rhythm lagged. Gunn himself put the B-25G through trials in action. T spearheaded an assault alongside the 3rd Assault Team, targeting a Japanese destroyer. He targeted the enemy's fire direction setup using the 75mm gun, crippling its capacity to direct artillery fire. Subsequently, Standard Explosives finished off the vessel. Publicly, T declared that the cannon alone had done the deed, though, in private, he conceded the bombs had sealed its fate. The B-25H variant came after the G-type in manufacturing. A total of 1,000 B-25Hs were produced, featuring the 75mm cannon alongside .50 caliber machine guns placed in diverse spots. This H version shifted the top turret ahead and removed the co-pilot seat to reduce mass, leaving the navigator to manage the cannon's ammunition. Such immense armament had drawbacks. The B-25H proved front-heavy and tricky to maneuver. Wright Field, the Army Air Force's research hub, warned T that the alterations posed risks and recommended halting flights until the balance problem got fixed. Folklore suggests shot back, suggesting they shelved the balance concerns for the war's length. We've got battles to wage. Whether true or not, the tale summed up T's mindset spot on. Flawless engineering took a backseat to battlefield utility. Flyers adapted to the flight challenges over time. The last model built, the B-25J, switched back to a standard bombardier's front on certain planes, but kept the gunner nose on others. Production reached 4,318 B-25Js, the highest number of any type. Certain B-25Js boasted 8 nose-mounted forward guns, 4 in side pods, 2 atop in the turret, and 4 at the sides. Overall, armament could include up to 1850 caliber machine guns, topping all WBU bombers in firepower. This heavy punch proved excessive for many scenarios, yet it struck fear into foes on a mental level. Japanese soldiers came to dread the Mitchell's engine growl. That signature rumble signaled doom approaching. During 1943 and 1944, altered B-25s hammered Japanese installations throughout the Pacific Theater. In August 1943, strafing B-25s hit air bases at Wewak in New Guinea. Those strikes wiped out 174 planes parked on the tarmac, shattering enemy aerial strength in the area. The Wewak operation succeeded thanks to T addressing yet another hurdle: distance. B-25s covered most assignments adequately, but Wewak pushed the boundaries. T devised a method with extra fuel containers stowed in the bomb hold. After use, crews dumped them out a floor hatch. Though basic, with vapors filling the cabin and wind rushing inside, it boosted reach by hundreds of miles. Those Wewak strikes dismantled Japanese command of New Guinea's skies, letting Allied troops push forward with little aerial threat. Come November 1943, B-25 strafers unleashed one of the conflict's flashiest assaults on Rabaul Harbor. Major Raymond Jock Henterberry commanded 38 B-25 striking ships in the fortified port. The assault unfolded at masthead level, backed by P-38s overhead and phosphorus ordnance generating cover smoke. From 38 ships present, 30 took direct strikes. A heavy cruiser, 3 destroyers, plus various cargo and auxiliary vessels went down or suffered heavy harm. The operation crippled Rabaul's role as an advance outpost and showed that even Japan's toughest strongholds fell prey to upgraded B-25s. During the 1944 Philippines push, B-25 strafers offered direct aid to infantry, wrecked enemy logistics routes, and targeted vessels across the islands. The planes earned the nickname Bat Out of Hell for their swift low dives that caught defenders off guard. These tweaked B-25s weren't the sole game-changers in the Pacific fight, but they ranked among the top performers. They obliterated countless vessels, grounded thousands of planes, and took out tens of thousands of hostile personnel. They supported MacArthur's leapfrogging tactics by cutting off Japanese outposts from reinforcements. They secured sky dominance for Allies, paving the way for beach assaults. T's individual battle raged on during these years. His relatives stayed captive at Stamus. Red Cross notes arrived now and then, but exchanges were irregular and monitored. He sensed the camp's hardships worsening. As defeats mounted for Japan, guards grew more brutal, supplies dwindled, illnesses proliferated. T could only intensify his efforts, each sortie inching victory nearer. By late 1944, U.S. troops stormed Lee in the Philippines. T remained active, logging combat flights at 45, constantly seeking better ways to dismantle adversaries. One evening in late 1944, enemy bombers hammered Tacloban airfield on Lee. T stood on the field as white phosphorus munitions burst close by. Shrapnel ripped into his shoulder, inflicting grave injury. The damage was profound, leaving his right arm limp and triggering excruciating intense agony plagued him. He was airlifted to Australia for medical care and endured a prolonged period of healing. The injury effectively halted his involvement in aerial combat and flight operations, though his wartime duties were drawing to a close regardless. On February 3, 1945, units from the 1st Cavalry Division, organized into a swift-moving column, liberated the Starnder Thomas internment camp in Manila. The troops arrived right as Japanese sentries were readying themselves to kill the camp's key figures. Amid the turmoil of urban battles in Manila, U.S. forces released more than 4,000 detainees. Polly and her 4 children were among those saved. They had withstood 3 years and 14 days of captivity. The household emerged gaunt, deeply scarred, yet intact. General MacArthur stopped by the site soon after the rescue and encountered the Gunn family. He made arrangements to transport them by air to Australia for a reunion with Pappy Gunn. This joyful gathering took place mere weeks following their freedom. The father, who had departed Manila on Christmas Eve 1941, at last embraced his loved ones once more. Polly had managed to shield and unite the kids amid harrowing conditions. The sons, now grown into adolescence, had coped with the enforced division between male and female sections. The daughters had borne extended hardship and scarcity. United anew, they were profoundly altered from their former selves. The conflict had transformed every one of them. Following his recovery, Gunn stayed on with the Army Air Forces. he advanced to the rank of lieutenant colonel and focused on adapting aircraft and refining combat strategies without returning to frontline flying. He stepped away from active duty on June 30, 1948, as a full colonel, honorably discharged on medical grounds owing to his wounds. Among his honors were the Distinguished Flying Cross with 1 oak leaf cluster for an additional accolade, the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, the Air Medal, 9 Purple Hearts, plus various unit commendations and service ribbons. Those 9 Purple Hearts signified 9 distinct instances of combat wounds or harm. Gunn went back to the Philippines and revived Philippine Airlines. The nation was piecing itself together after prolonged enemy control and the ravages of its liberation. Gunn aided in reviving aviation links, bridging isolated regions once more. He persisted in piloting, embracing dangers, and testing boundaries. On October 11, 1957, just 7 days shy of his 58th birthday, Gunn was at the controls of a chartered plane that slammed into a vicious tempest. The craft went down. Paul Irvin "Pappy" Gunn met his end engaged in the pursuit that defined nearly 4 decades of his life. Aviation. He found his final rest at Barrancas National Cemetery, located at Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida, the very spot where he had once trained pilots. His influence endured in diverse ways. The B-25 Strafer upgrades he championed stayed in use across the conflict. Roughly 9,890 B-25 Mitchell bombers were produced, with thousands adapted into strafing variants following Gunn's blueprints. The skip bombing method he refined sank numerous Japanese vessels and played a key role in securing Allied triumphs in the Pacific theater. Gunn proved that breakthroughs could arise from unexpected quarters, including tweaks devised by a sorrow-stricken parent in a repair facility. The established military hierarchy preferred to wage World War II using standard armaments and sanctioned maneuvers. Gunn illustrated how dire situations demanded bold adaptations. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea turned into a benchmark for militaries globally. Blending reconnaissance, synergy, innovative armaments, and fresh approaches yielded total success with scant expenditure. It highlighted the potential of aviation dominance over maritime threats when wielded effectively. 8 cargo ships obliterated, 4 escorts submerged, more than 5,000 enemy losses, all at the price of just 4 Allied planes. The equation was stark and merciless. Dominance of the skies by foes rendered survival impossible. Each vessel lost in the Bismarck Sea spared countless operations that might otherwise have occurred. Scores of soldiers who avoided combat, vast quantities of munitions that went unused. Neutralizing resources prior to their arrival on the front lines proved the sharpest strategy in warfare. The enhanced B-25 evolved into the pivotal tool enabling this. It could patrol vast distances to spot targets, neutralize their protections via intense barrages, obliterate them through precision low-level strikes, and circle back for further sorties. A single B-25 Strafer achieved feats that once demanded joint efforts from assorted plane models. Japan grasped this reality far too belatedly. Post the Bismarck Sea route, enemy leaders recognized the peril of daylight convoy runs near Allied airstrips. They shifted to nocturnal transits, deployed subs for vital goods, and grew dependent on shallow draft barges that could conceal themselves along shorelines by daylight. Such tactics curbed but failed to halt the attrition. B-25 Strafers pursued these barges with equal prowess to larger targets. Radar-outfitted B-25s on night missions detected groups in the gloom. No hour was secure, no route immune, no haven reliable for Japanese supply lines. Allied logistics across the Southwest Pacific grew increasingly constricted over time, leaving Japanese outposts increasingly cut off. In locations such as New Guinea, the Philippines, and various Pacific islands, enemy forces persisted in battle despite shrinking resources and the absence of any resupply. These soldiers displayed remarkable valor and determination, yet their efforts were ultimately futile. The dominance in the skies, secured through tools like the adapted B-25, rendered their bravery moot. By 1945, this enhanced B-25 had established itself as the go-to tool against enemy vessels in the Pacific theater. The plane advanced further with models like the B-25G AH and J, featuring ever more robust weaponry, though the core idea stayed true to Gunn's pioneering vision, transforming a mid-sized bomber into an airborne artillery unit capable of neutralizing enemy fire and unleashing precise low-level strikes. Even as hostilities ceased in August 1945, these altered B-25s continued operational flights. They numbered among the planes that accompanied the Japanese delegation, surrendering from their homeland to Manila during mid-August. It seemed appropriate that the very machines which had played a key role in Japan's downfall would observe its capitulation. Examinations after the conflict, conducted by historians from both the U.S. and Japan, underscored the importance of Gunn's breakthroughs. Officers from the Japanese Navy noted that following the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, they realized operations in areas reachable by Allied airstrips were too hazardous. The mental toll proved just as crucial as the material losses. Leaders of convoys understood that strafing bombers could materialize abruptly, wiping out whole groups before countermeasures could activate. The upgraded B-25s introduced a fresh approach to combat, where bombers pursued maritime targets with the stealth of subs and the punch of heavy warships. These developments influenced warfare far beyond the Pacific Campaign. Air services around the globe later reviewed the tactics of skip bombing and nose-mounted guns. The notion of the dedicated gunship, a plane built mainly for direct gunfire over traditional ordnance, gained widespread adoption. Vietnam-era and later gunships, including the AC-47, AC-1919, and AC-130, traced their roots directly to Gunn's reworked B-25 designs. Out of the 9,190 B-25s produced in World War II, more than 100 endure in the present day, primarily in America. Numerous examples remain airworthy, thrilling spectators at aviation events with their impressive scale, thunderous noise, and storied past. The signature rumble from Wright R-2600 engines leaves a lasting impression. Spotting a B-25 turning sharply close to the ground, much like it once did above Japanese flotillas, evokes the feats these planes achieved. A handful of operational B-25s are outfitted as attackers, complete with forward-pointing cannons in the fuselage. During airshow displays, when these weapons discharge blanks, the clamor is deafening. One can see the flash from the barrels, and the plane vibrates from the kickback. Observing such a B-25 strafer in action offers a brief insight into the terror faced by Japanese crews in their dying moments as vessels sank. B-25s appear in museums across the world in diverse setups. The National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, houses several specimens. At the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, where Gunn once trained pilots, a B-25 is on exhibit. The Smithsonian's National Air and Space Museum safeguards this legacy. Every preserved plane recounts tales of ingenuity, urgency, and triumph. In 1959, General George Kenney released the account of Pappy Gunn, a biography highlighting the innovator who reshaped the conflict. Kenney, now in retirement, aimed to immortalize Gunn's role. The volume covered his aircraft alterations, frontline sorties, and his private battle to rescue his relatives. Kenney described Gunn as a pivotal figure in the Pacific Theater, whose unofficial experiments spared countless Allied personnel and hastened the war's conclusion. Nathaniel Gunn, the youngest child of Pappy, also chronicled his father's experiences. His writings offered an intimate view, depicting daily life in Santo Tomas and the agonizing anticipation of freedom. The Gunn family's ordeal illustrated the personal toll of conflict and the resilience needed to survive it. In 1975, the U.S. Air Force paid tribute to Gunn after his death by christening a training center in his name. The honor arrived late, yet it rang true. Gunn never chased fame. He pursued results. The narrative of a single inventor's rogue enhancements yielding a lethal arsenal endures as a lesson. Gunn rejected the permanence of his loved one's captivity. He dismissed the sufficiency of standard armaments. He ignored bureaucratic barriers to creativity. This defiance, paired with engineering prowess and backing from Kenney, forged changes that redefined combat. The B-25 strafer obliterated scores of Japanese vessels, eliminated thousands of foes, and played a vital part in securing Allied success in the Pacific. Breakthroughs often arise from unlikely origins and flourish via unconventional paths. The reworked B-25 did not single-handedly claim World War II. That success demanded the efforts of countless millions, wielding an array of thousands of armaments amid 4 years of worldwide warfare. Yet the adapted B-25 delivered impacts far beyond its limited deployment. This plane embodied the potential unlocked by urgent need colliding with chance when individual drives synced perfectly with strategic demands and a single person's resolve rejected defeat outright. Emerging from a repair shed in a moment of sheer exigency, the craft plunged into battle-skimming treetop levels, machine guns roaring, projectiles ricocheting over waves to crash against ships and detonate beneath the surface. It shattered Japan's dreams of replenishing their troops. It hastened the conflict's end. It preserved countless lives on the Allied side and ultimately liberated one household after 3 grueling years in captivity. That had been the true aim from the start.